All right. Roger, we're live. Take it away.
Oh, we're live. All right, great. Hey, welcome, Hum Nation. Good evening. Sorry about that. I didn't know I was queued in. So I'm on assignment here in Orlando, Florida. Sunny, nice and warm. So welcome everybody in this evening to another episode of 5 Elements of Success Player Development Series. I'm Roger Nick, your host and founder of Junior Golf Hub. As always, really excited about the show tonight. This evening, we're going to be talking about rotation, what's enough and what's too much. As always, I got my live co-host there in the studio, Tyler Campbell, Director of Performance at the Golf Performance Center, and Dennis Holman, Director of Coaching at the Golf Performance Center. So, guys, welcome.
Thanks, Roger. Excited to be here. Miss you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, got a great show tonight. I was actually just catching up with the Hurricane Junior Golf Tour guys, Mario Conti and Mike Barbato at Orange County National Day, and they were talking about the Long Drive Championship happening tomorrow night on their YouTube channel, and it really fits in perfectly for our show tonight, which is the rotation that we're going to be talking about. And again, what's enough and what's too much. So look forward to sharing that information with everybody tonight. But as always, before we get into that, as always, make sure you're sending in your questions, your comments. Anything that you want us to help you with, and maybe we can help make you better as a golfer, maybe an athlete, and hopefully maybe in the pathway of life on your journey. But send it into 5 Elements of the Golf Performance Center, our YouTube chat. So thanks so much. As always, we have a pop quiz tonight. The next question is, can you name the assessment you should use to determine if you have any adequate lower body rotation? Name the assessment you should use to determine if you have adequate lower body rotation. And if you stay tuned, I think Tyler may be demonstrating what the answer might be. So if you get the answer, send it in. We'll pull it out of the hat. Hopefully you'll want this nice zip up by Under Armour there. So looking forward to getting those answers in. So again, thanks so much for tuning in. So before we get into this week's show, Tyler, why don't you do a little recap from last week's show?
Yeah, well, Roger, we took last week off. Last week was Thanksgiving, so I hope everybody had a great holiday, safe holiday out there.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You were still here, I'm sure. But
yeah.
Now, the week prior to that, we did get into covering some off-season training, how to attack our off-season. We had Dr. Brand on the show, really talked about evaluating first and foremost, developing your baselines physically and with your golf skill set, setting some goals, how to set goals properly, and then essentially creating your plan all said and done. So as a great episode as we start to get into this cooler weather, and we're excited to be back this week, back in the studio.
Absolutely.
Back in the studio. Well, I'm not back in the studio this week. I'm actually down here enjoying the sunshine down in Orlando. So but you guys are roughing it out up there, I think.
Yeah, you picked a good day to leave. A little cold up here today.
So Dennis, as we're talking about off-season training and getting into really kind of our deliberate practice mode, if you will, and working so hard on improvement for the next year or next phases of development, we talk about rotation, but one of the questions I think we hear a lot quite often is, what is good rotation? Can you describe what good rotation, and when you talk about rotation in the golf swing, what is good rotation?
Yeah, I mean, it's an important question. I think it's third fundamental in our pyramid. So it's something that we definitely focus on a lot, like a lot of people do. But it's not just the quantity of the rotation. It's really the quality first that we're looking at, from the pelvis to the torso. How is the body moving? What's the quality of that rotation? That is ultimately going to dictate, the quantity, really along with, your function and whatever your body is capable of doing. So we're not just looking at, necessarily that more is better. We're looking at, are you getting into good leverage positions where, you can move the club fast and control it.
Yeah, so one of those things then, Dennis, so we talk about, and obviously we talk about this always, our primary fundamentals and leading from ground forces to posture to rotation. So it's, ultimately so important. That's why we work so hard on getting good posture, correct? Is that helps lead to better rotation?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's why that pyramid is laid out the way it is. I mean, from lead factors to lag factors. So the posture really sets you up, as Tyler can talk about, when you get that joint alignment and you get those vertebrae lined up the right way, it really allows you to maximize what your body's capable of doing when it comes to thoracic rotation and getting separation between upper and lower body and really creating some potential energy there. So that's really important to understand rotation through function, through how somebody's set up for, from a posture standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree, Dennis.
Yeah,
I think, Roger, go ahead, not to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, I was going to ask you, Tyler, on that standpoint. I think it is so important that we understand that function dictates form. So from the physical side of things and from your perspective, how do you measure and how do you get to understanding what is good rotation there? So you got to measure it, right? I mean, you got to figure out what's good.
No, you absolutely do. And I'll just reiterate before I get into the specifics of how we're going to measure the rotation, we need to look at where are we rotating from. So, if we start from the ground up, like we look at, the stability mobility model is something that we've talked about on episodes in the past, where we need a stable, stable segment at the foot. We have a mobile ankle, stable knee, mobile hip, stable lumbar spine, mobile thoracic spine. So we're going to focus a lot today on those two areas in the middle, really the mobile hip joint and the mobile thoracic spine, and how we can measure that to determine, are we giving ourselves the best opportunity at rotating properly and not maybe getting rotation from some of those stable segments, essentially are just compensations. And I should say that just because a segment is stable doesn't mean that it doesn't have small ability to rotate. The lumbar spine certainly rotates, to a certain degree. The knee even has subtle rotation, but we've all seen those gruesome injuries where the knee might be rotating more than it's supposed to be, being a hinge joint. So, we're going to talk about hip mobility and thoracic mobility being the primary drivers of rotation, but it starts from having the right stability in the right areas first and foremost to be able to rotate off of. So what do you say we get into some lower body rotation first?
All right.
So if you're looking to determine whether or not you've got good lower body rotation, we're going to call this the lower quarter test. You can set this station up at home, do this yourself, and essentially determine if you pass or fail. If you fail, we're going to give you some exercises here that you can work on to improve. But so first and foremost, you're going to take your 6-iron out of your bag and you're going to lay it right across the front of you here. So I'll get my pointer here. You can see Dennis has his 6-iron lying on the ground right across the front of his body. We're going to use the lie angle of that 6-iron for the second club position. So you're going to take any other club in your bag and you're going to put that right along the sole of the 6-iron, and that essentially is going to set up your marker. All right, so from there, Dennis, what I want you to do is stand with your feet together, kind of, toes up against that 6-iron, and then just place that left foot on the instep of your right foot. So all that weight's going to shift to your right side. All right, now keeping the foot flat, and I should mention, if you can do this barefoot, that's ideal. I'm not going to make Dennis take his shoes off in the studio because, I don't need to say anything else. But the idea is that we're going to keep that foot nice and flat. You want to be able to stay in the studio, I get it. We're going to keep that foot nice and flat. All the weight's on the right foot. There can be some soft bend in that right knee, but really not a lot. All right, we don't want too much flex in that right leg. I'm going to ask Dennis to rotate to his right as far as he can until he feels some resistance, where that right before that foot wants to roll typically. And then we're going to pay attention to where the club is across his hips to the relationship of that club that's on the ground at the angle there. You notice that club isn't quite parallel to the club that's on the ground. That's telling me Dennis's right hip's a little tight. If I was to go ahead and rotate one more time, if he was going to rotate again and that club was more parallel with the one that I'm holding, all right, those clubs are parallel, his hips are rotated a little bit more, and we see that he's going to pass that test. All right, what is that telling us?
Well, thanks, Tyler.
Yep.
Sorry, Tyler, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but no, Tyler, that angle of that club line, that lie angle of the club, what is that, and why is that important?
Yeah, it's about 60 degrees. We want to see about 60 to 60, and correct me if I'm wrong, 60 to 62 degrees, depending on the...
standard's about 62.5, but you're getting, within a couple degrees there.
If we're within 2 degrees or so for this test, we're getting enough information for the mechanics of our golf swing. But just to give you a ballpark, if you can get about 60 to 62 degrees of rotation, again, getting that club across your waist parallel to the one that's on the ground, you're going to essentially have good, solid lower body rotation. And again, we call this the lower quarter test. This is a great test to assess how much rotation we have in the lower body. Now, with that said, we need to test external rotation. I'll talk in a minute about where each of these comes into play. But let's go ahead and set the same foot in front. So left foot off the instep, right foot in front. I'm going to have you now rotate to the left, okay, all the way open. Now, In the studio here, I only set up one side, but ideally you'd have another club and another 6-iron, so the club would be going off at an angle here, and we'd be doing the same thing. We want to see if this club is parallel to the club that's set off that shaft that way. So again, you want to be at or beyond parallel with that club. So where do internal and external rotation come in in the golf swing? So we'll use a right-handed golfer as an example, all right? Not to rule out the lefties out there, but just to keep it straightforward. If you're a right-handed golfer and you go take the club away, your hips are rotating into your right leg. That's what we call right hip internal rotation, all right? So again, my belt buckle, you can think of that as the center point. I'm rotating into my right leg. My left hip here is in external rotation. As I transition more into impact, my left hip now is going to go into internal rotation and the right hip in external, so it's just going to flip-flop. All right, so you need adequate hip mobility both internally and externally on both hips to give yourself the best opportunity at rotating well through the lower body.
Yeah, well said. That pelvic movement is really important. Go ahead, Roger.
I was just going to say, so Tyler, is there too little hip rotation there? That obviously is red flags. What's too little hip?
If I were to do the test, Roger, that would have been, no, I'm just kidding. So yeah, too little hip rotation.
That's what I was getting at. I wanted to see you do it.
This is one of the tests that we see the most limitation in, to be totally honest. When folks come through our facility, they get evaluated. This test is by far one of the most difficult for folks to pass. And so anything, honestly, I would say below that 40 degree, if you're between 40 and 60, you're on the right track. We need to continue to work on it. If you're below 40 degrees of hip rotation in this particular test, that's a big red flag. Definitely going to see some other compensation showing up.
Yeah, Tyler, I think that's great. And I think one of the things we have to understand for junior golfers out there and your junior golfers and parents out there is that you see your young junior athletes seem like they're rotating a tremendous amount. And we hear quite often it's like Gumby. And I think it's one of those things we have to be very careful on because they, to your statement earlier, Tyler, I think we see a lot of young athletes, and I know Dennis and Lee talked about this, they compensate. They compensate with giving are taking somewhere maybe a stable joint or something that should be more stable and using that for more of the mobility. And later on, as they start to develop more, now obviously it might work out earlier, but later on as they start having, maybe, using the ground better and different things, and as their body starts to mature, it starts to show up as a limitation. They start really, those compensations no longer work, correct?
Yes, no, I would totally agree. I would also argue that, we talk about rotation, and that's something that we're looking to get mobility out of certain areas, but I'll go back and say that without stability, you're not going to have the ability to rotate, right, to control it. So those junior golfers who are all over the place and lack that stability, that rotation oftentimes is what I'm just going to say it's kind of fake. They're faking rotation. They might be really athletic and making it look right, but are they actually rotating, right? Yeah,
again, back to the quality. A lot of times we'll see, sometimes they might not pass, if you will, one of these basic rotation tests, whether it's pelvis or thoracic spine, and they actually may over-rotate through the compensations. It allows them to actually get, too much rotation, but it's not quality rotation. It's not rotation where you can move the club fast, control it, and ideally not get hurt over time.
Yeah, so Dennis, speaking about that, and so as we're moving into really in our developmental phases here, and you got a lot of young athletes around the globe right now trying to, take some time off from off season, if you will. What are some of the exercises and drills and feedback tools that you use to measure and also help improve this?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. Maybe we can reverse roles here. Have you jump in and
there you go.
Do some body swings for us. Give you a club here. You can put that on your shoulders there, across your shoulders, and go ahead and get into golf posture there. Yeah.
Do my posture drill here, right?
So again, going back to posture, we reviewed this posture drill. So he just did a quick posture drill to make sure his, spine is in a good neutral position. The vertebrae are lined up properly. But the club on the shoulders can be just some basic feedback on your rotation from the shoulders. So as Tyler goes ahead and he rotates back, we're not necessarily using the clubs on the ground as a reference point, but you can get a sense of, are you approaching 90 degrees of rotation? Just to see, about 90 is usually pretty good. More is not always better, as we say. Getting 110, 120, unless you're controlling it and you're really moving well, it might not work. So that's just a basic body swing to get some sense of where you are in the backswing. In the downswing, what we can do is we can go ahead and do some stop and impact drills, or a step. Let's do a step drill first if you want to just kind of give an idea. Just don't hit this behind you. A step drill, which will, as we go in order here, we're working on backswing. Okay, now we're talking about changing direction. So if you think about getting some separation or rotating the upper body more than the lower body, right? Getting some separation or kind of pulling the rubber band, if you will, and then in transition, pulling it even more by moving the lower body first.
It's a little tough with these TVs here, but I might be able to. Let me scooch forward just a little bit. So basically, as I take the club back, and then those hips are going to come forward, right? They're going to. I'm not doing a step drill right now, but I'm trying to exaggerate the hips.
So
I'm kind of tight on space.
Right.
So Dennis,
go ahead.
Dennis, is that what you're trying to do? You're trying to show what upper body, lower body, separation and then closure of the upper body to the lower body in the downswing?
Well, that would be, so if we're trying to get that separation first with the body swing, right, we're trying to get a sense of separation. Now transition with the step drill, trying to increase that separation, and now you talk about closing it. So a stop and impact drill would be really good to just to get a sense of how to close that separation up, because that's where the power really kicks in. We call that peak speed, or your speed sequence as you approach impact, kind of like cracking a whip. You have to stop the handle to get the energy to the end of the whip, otherwise it'll never really get there. So stop and impact drill is just one where I can just give a basic demonstration. You can go at good speed, but you can come in and you just stop at impact. But as you start to do it with a lot of speed, you get a sense of how to decelerate the segments in order: lower body, torso, arms, club. When we measure here with some of the systems that we have, we really see a direct correlation between, that peak speed sequence and club head speed that that our juniors have, and that really goes back to stability, really lead leg stability.
Absolutely, no doubt.
Hey, so talking about lead leg stability, Dennis, and I think that's really awesome and good stuff there. So when you're talking about creating that, how are the feet moving? Or obviously we've been doing a lot of research on with swing catalysts and how those ground forces are applying this. So what are the feet doing to create that rotation and separation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So ideally in the backswing, if we go through the entire swing, right, ideally with good quality rotation, you can really keep a good pressure on the inside of that trail foot, which really sets you up. Kind of, I always say it's like a pitcher on the rubber. They've got that kind of preset to push off towards home plate. So, pushing off from the trail foot towards the lead foot, now getting a lot of pressure into the lead foot in transition, like in that step drill. Obviously stepping, you're putting pressure into the ground. And then using the ground, really in a way, it's kind of inverse to what people think. As you're rotating forward, your feet or your trail foot is actually trying to push backwards, counterclockwise, if you will, to get yourself to rotate forward. So, and then obviously there's vertical forces where you're pushing up as you start to extend and really, release the golf club. So, people use the ground in different ways based on what they can do, but I mean, that's kind of a general idea of how it progresses through the swing.
Yeah, that's tremendous. That was so important, I think, to highlight that, Dennis, because I think so many people tend to think that rotation only comes from their hip or their torso, and the reality is that you move those segments, it really starts with that pushing into the ground and pushing forward the feet and vice versa in the downswing, right?
Yeah, no question. And we see it in all sports, especially rotational sports. You really can't create speed unless you leverage the ground. I mean, it's again, you leverage the ground to move efficiently and get force into the golf club in this sense. So yeah, it's key. That's where it all starts, bottom of the pyramid.
Now, Roger, one thing Dennis and I were talking about before the show was just different ways that folks create rotation if they struggle to rotate. And so let's talk about some of the different ways that folks are going to kind of, perceive that they're rotating if they maybe fail this test or fail the seated trunk rotation test. And Dennis, what do you see the most, or what are some common tendencies that you see in the juniors?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few. Again, back to the quality. I mean, I think a lot of times people don't realize, some of the juniors don't realize how tight they are. Back to what you said, Roger, I think a lot of people think they're, they're like Gumby. They have a lot of range of motion, but it's not always the case. And so we'll see a lot of sway. Sway reverse spine is one of them. We'll see a lot of lack of rotation of the pelvis, which just doesn't allow you to rotate the upper body in the way that you want. And early extension is a big one in the forward swing. Those are 3 big ones.
Okay, cool.
Tyler, it sounded like that kind of hit your golf swing a little bit.
Hey. Let's see.
You're looking good in that demonstration, man. That was all good stuff. So Dennis, as we're kind of moving into the next segment of our primary fundamentals and moving into training, what's some really good takeaways, and what would be your feedback mechanism or tools that you would give the audience?
Yeah, I think those are a couple good ones. As far as feedback, it depends what systems you have or what kind of technology you have. If you have good eyes on you, there's nothing better than that with a coach, even if it's just video and drawing some lines and just getting a sense of where you are with your rotations. If you can get measured somewhere, that would be fantastic, just to get on a system and actually see what your body's actually doing. Again, going through the self-assessment and just getting an understanding of where you are physically and what you're capable of doing is really important as well. So,
Yeah, I think that's really great. I mean, the self-assessment, the PDI self-assessment is one of the, I think, best ways to start to understand this and get at least some elementary feedback in the sense of, hey, just doing that and knowing what you need to do to maybe progress to a coach-guided assessment. So, Tyler, on the physical side of things, obviously this is a great time to work on some of those physical limitations, but I guess what would you see as the major obstacles for a lot of young players out there that to get some of these exercises incorporated into their off-season stuff?
Yeah, I think again, when we talk about rotation, in the traditional golf instruction world, it's not uncommon for the instructor to necessarily ask something of the student that they're not physically capable of doing, and that's something that we're trying to change that mindset. We're trying to allow educate both the instructor and the athlete that, hey, there's a reason that I'm doing what I'm doing in my swing. It's because it's what I'm able to physically do or physically capable of. So I would just take it back to what we talk about every week, function dictates form. Again, understanding that working on the corrective exercises, the improving stability in the areas that need to be stable and improving mobility in the areas that need to be mobile, it's going to give you the best opportunity to be able to do what the instructor's asking you to do. And so, all said and done, I would say I'll give you a few exercises, very, very basic exercises. Side-lying T-spine rotation is a great one to improve your thoracic mobility. And then working on just a seated 90-90 position on the ground where your shins are at 90 degrees. And those are both 2 exercises that I think will help improve, the range of motion in those areas in particular.
Tyler, how important is it, and those seem like great exercises, but how important is it to work bilateral exercises, or at least both ways? Because obviously, golf swing is predominantly in one direction. But how important is it to work both directions, to increase any type of mobility or limitation you may see?
Oh, sure. Well, there's a few reasons. I would say first and foremost, to prevent injury, we need to be training in both directions at all times. And I, not jokingly, but loosely ask folks, how many swings have you taken on your non-dominant side today? And and they're kind of looking at me like, well, why would I do that? Essentially, it's just to balance you out. You know what I mean? It's to keep the muscles on one side of the body at least relatively awake and close to the ones that you're using, the most. So for starters, we want to train both directions to avoid injury. Next, there's neurological benefit. I always say train the non-dominant side to increase the speed on the dominant side. And so, you can swing in one direction over and over and over and over again, and you might see incremental gains. But I would say if you can get the neurological system talking to the non-dominant side as well as the dominant side, you're going to be able to communicate the messages. You're going to have to keep it simple. You're going to have to send the messages. They're going to be really efficient, I would say. Training non-dominant side essentially strengthens your brakes and allows you to generate more power. So yeah, I would say training both directions, very, very important.
Yeah, that's great. Great information there. And guys, as always, I mean, I think what you guys are talking about here is rotation. But this leads obviously to better ball striking. It leads to better consistency in what we're doing, and obviously further distance because the efficiency in what most players are going to move. I would assume, right, Dennis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just lays that foundation for like lasting change, like something that'll really hold up. Ultimately under pressure, right? It's instead of just chasing that kind of that quick fix or that feel good feeling right now, just laying that foundation for the future.
And it might not be pretty at first. I mean, I think a lot of times when you have new motion that you haven't mastered, you haven't learned to control, or you are learning to control it, it typically doesn't get better right away. So stick with it and trust the process.
Yeah, I love that. So, guys, parting, information here. Dennis, anything that you want to say in parting on the rotation?
Probably just reiterate what I said. It's really important to look at the quality of your rotation and what's dictating it. Chasing distance. What tends to happen, what we see with junior golfers that aren't physically ready to hit the ball as far as they want to, as far as they desire to. And just physically can't do it, end up just compensating and really building bad habits for the future. So, if you think long term and you really get the right information, the right assessment of where you are physically, where's your golf swing, and just look at quality and just do the right things over time, you're going to hit the ball plenty far and you're going to be able to control it.
I would agree.
Great. Tyler, anything on your side? Any parting?
Yeah, I would second that. I would say more isn't always better in this situation. I would say, it has to happen in steps, and just kind of to second what Dennis said, you go out, we definitely want to train fast at certain points in development. There's no doubt about it. And so we're not denying that. But if you have to simultaneously be working on improving your function to support the engine that you're trying to build.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about Roy McElroy, for example, and I think he's a great example of this as a young player who achieved some really audacious things when he was a really kind of a 17, 18-year-old player, but he didn't have a lot of really good functionality, and I think you see how as he's matured, how he's grown and tightened up his body, tightened up all the things that he was doing, and they actually decreased the range of motion he had in some ways and actually increased his torso range, but he also increased the X-factor stretch, which created a lot more efficient and a lot more speed. For a small guy, he's hitting the ball longer than anybody out there, almost as long as anybody out there on tour except for DeChambeau. But, that's pretty eye-opening when you see a guy his size hit the ball, prodigious lengths like that, really just being more efficient.
Yeah, and he did that over time. He'll tell you, that he hits it 50 yards longer than he did, 10 years ago or 12 years ago when he first came out, as you were talking about. And he did that over time, and just through a lot of hard work and doing it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really good to see that, and it's good, I think, for a game as well. Hopefully, people kind of follow suit and understand the process is important, and not just trying to quick fix to reach a certain destination that may not be the end destination they want. So anyway, hey, moving forward, so I think we probably have some questions in the audience. Andrew, we have any questions?
We do have a couple questions. The first being, what exercise can I do at home to improve my rotation?
Yeah, I think generally, again, I just reference back to what Tyler did as far as the the backswing quality rotation. The stop at impact drill would be really good, and the step change. So that's kind of, I said that was a little bit out of order, but those three kind of address the different phases of the swing. But I think really on the physical side, you've got to work on it.
It's kind of a loaded question on my side because there's a lot of exercises that might not appear to be rotational exercises that are going to help you rotate. A lot of times we'll train anti-rotation exercises first, which are where you're resisting rotation to basically earn the right to rotate, as some of other industry professionals have coined. But if you can control a weighted implement without rotating, you're certainly going to be able to control it when you need to rotate. So we'll train anti-rotation motions first, like a simple pal-off press if I have a band coming from maybe my door, and it's pulled out in front of me, that band wants to pull me back towards that door. I'm resisting it and pressing it perpendicular to where the anchor point is. That's a great training method. I mentioned side-lying T-spine rotations earlier, as well as just a 90-90 seated position. There's a ton of exercises that are going to help you improve your rotation, but I would say, start with some of those anti-rotation exercises first.
Great. The next question is, what allows for more rotation? A wider or smaller stance, and why?
Again, I'm just going to keep saying the same thing over and over. The quality of the rotation is what is important. I think it's pretty intuitive to say if your stance is too wide, maybe you can't rotate as much. If it's too narrow, you can rotate more. But again, more is not always better. What we're looking for is that nice blend of a stable base and good separation of upper and lower body rotation to create that potential energy. So the answer is the proper stance width, which is really simply put, if you think about just getting kind of like in between your big toe and the next toe in line with the inside of your armpit. What you can measure that with a ruler and put that on your alignment stick, a couple pieces of tape, and that can be your feedback when you go practice.
I would agree. I think from the way the joints move in the body, you can get too wide. I also think you could get too narrow, become a little bit more unstable. But I would say that a lot of times there's this conception that I need this big wide base, or my driver swing, if you will. You hear that a lot. My driver swing, I've got this wider stance with. I don't necessarily believe that. And I think that the proper setup position, or the proper setup posture, is going to set you up to rotate to the most that you can at this point. And and then I would say get in the gym and work on it.
Yep. The next question is, how does proper equipment affect rotation?
That's a great question. That probably came from Nick Novak now, but that's a good question. So, clubs are too long and too heavy is very commonplace in junior golf. And Tyler can talk about it on the physical side. When you have something that's just too heavy and you can't manage it, it is going to affect how you rotate and how your body moves. When you're trying to turn and lift that club up in the air, it is going to you're probably not going to move very well. So that would be a common one.
I would agree.
Right,
yeah, I would agree. Essentially, you could take a 2x4 and hold that and see how that feels. Swinging that around, it's not going to be very easy. You're not going to be able to generate speed. You're going to change the way you move to do it. That's exaggerated, but I would say junior athletes who haven't developed that strength and stability are essentially doing that on a slightly smaller scale.
And our last question is, how important to your dominant side rotation is working your non-dominant side?
Awesome. So just like I mentioned a little earlier in the show, training your non-dominant side, I like to think of that as your brakes. So, if in order to generate power from one segment of the body to the next, so lower body to the upper body to the arms to the club, you actually have to slow down the previous segment, decelerate. And we want to look at how quickly, stick with me here, how quickly you can slow down. All right. So it sounds a little tough to follow, but if you're not stable, you're not going to be able to slow down a segment quickly. Or crack the whip, as Dennis was talking about. You're kind of just going to throw the towel, and that's not going to be very powerful. So what I would say is training the non-dominant side is going to help you slow down quicker, generate more power.
Awesome.
That's all the questions we have for today, but we do have a pop quiz winner.
Pop quiz winner.
The winner is Lauren Hayes.
All right.
Nice.
Lauren
Awesome.
Hayes.
Congrats, Lauren.
Congratulations. That's great. Oh, the answer to the pop quiz was the lower quarter test. Lower quarter test. You can set it up at home with your sticks and measure your hip rotation.
Great job, Lauren. Great job, Tyler, on that rotation. Well, that brings us to the end of this segment. Let's talk about what's going to happen next week. Next week, we're going to be talking with Dr. Josh Brandt's going to be back on, talking about off-season goal setting and what he's going to work through and how that process works, and mental game fundamentals. So we're really excited about continuing. Last show we had kind of an assignment to work on your goals and make sure that you come back to that. So hopefully, if you tuned in last time Dr. Brandt was here, tune in this week. He's going to take you on those off-season goal setting and mental game fundamentals. That's next week. So looking forward to that. As always, want to say thank you to our sponsors, Junior Golf Hub, making sure you're downloading that app, get those coaches in your pocket, find that right fit for you out there. Make sure that you are helping, that's helping you achieve your goal of playing at the next level. Obviously, finding the right fit academically as well. And also Ethan Allen Preparatory School, helping you achieve your greatness in the classroom, on the golf course, and in life. And want to make sure that you guys tune in next week and make sure you guys are getting after it. Enjoy your journey. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Have a great week, guys.
Way to go.